Ethical hacking. Through an interesting story, Dan runs a trading company. He does online training with the money his customers invest. Everything was going well, and Dan's business was booming, until a hacker decided to hack the company's servers. The hacker stole the credentials of various trading accounts. He asked for a lump sum ransom in exchange for the stolen credentials. Dan took the hacker's words lightly and didn't pay the hacker. As a result, the hacker withdrew money from various customers' accounts, and Dan was liable to pay back the customers. Dan lost a lot of money, and also the trust of his customers. After this incident, Dan gave a lot of thought as to what could have gone wrong with the security infrastructure in his company. He wished there was someone from his company who could have run a test attack to see how vulnerable his systems were before the hacker penetrated into the network. This was when he realized he needed an employee who thinks like a hacker and identifies the vulnerabilities in his network before an outsider does. To do this job, he hired an ethical hacker, John. John was a skilled professional who worked precisely like a hacker. In no time, he spotted several vulnerabilities in Dan's organization and closed all the loopholes. Hiring an ethical hacker helped Dan protect his customers from further attacks in the future. This, in turn, increased the company's productivity and guarded the company's reputation. So, now you know hacking is not always bad. John, in this scenario, exposed the vulnerabilities in the existing network, and such hacking is known as ethical hacking. Ethical hacking is distributed into 6 different phases. Let us look at these phases step by step with respect to how John, our ethical hacker, will act. Before launching an attack, the first step John takes is to gather all the necessary information about the organization's system that he intends to attack. This step is called reconnaissance. He uses tools like Nmap and hping for this purpose. John then tries to spot the vulnerabilities, if any, in the target system using tools like Nmap and Nexpose. This is the scanning phase. Now that he has located the vulnerabilities, he then tries to exploit them. This step is known as gaining access. After John makes his way through the organization's networks, he tries to maintain his access for future attacks by installing backdoors in the target system. The Metasploit tool helps him with this. This phase is called maintaining access. John is a brilliant hacker. Hence, he tries his best not to leave any evidence of his attack. This is the 5th phase, clearing tracks. We now have the last phase, that is reporting. In this phase, John documents a summary of his entire attack, the vulnerabilities he spotted, the tools he used, and the success rate of the attack. Looking into the report, Dan is now able to take a call and see how to protect his organization from any external cyber attacks. Don't you all think John is an asset to any organization? If you want to become an ethical hacker like John, then there are a few skills that you need to acquire. First and foremost, you need to have a good knowledge of operating environments such as Windows, Linux, Unix, and Macintosh. You must have reasonably good knowledge of programming languages such as HTML, PHP, Python, SQL, and JavaScript. Networking is the base of ethical hacking. Hence, you should be good at it. Ethical hackers should be well aware of security laws so that they don't misuse their skills. Finally, you must have a global certification on ethical hacking to successfully bag a position of an ethical hacker like John.
Happy learning.
We humans are highly tech-savvy in today's times. With the extensive use of the internet and modern technologies, there is a massive challenge in protecting all our digital data, such as net banking information, account credentials, and medical reports, to name a few. Have you heard about the deadly WannaCry ransomware attack? The attack happened in May 2017 in Asia. and then it spread across the world. Within a day, more than 230,000 computers were infected across 150 countries. The WannaCry cryptoworm encrypted the data and locked the users out of their systems. For decryption of the data, the users were asked for a ransom of $300 to $600 in Bitcoin. The users who used the unsupported version of Microsoft Windows and those who hadn't installed the security update of April 2017 were targeted in this attack. The WannaCry attack took a toll on every sector. Top-tier organizations like Hitachi, Nissan, and FedEx had to put their businesses on hold as their systems were affected too. Now, this is what you call a cyber attack. To prevent such attacks, cybersecurity is implemented. We can define cybersecurity as the practice of protecting networks, programs, computer systems, and their components from unauthorized digital attacks. These illegal attacks are often referred to as hacking. Hacking refers to exploiting weaknesses in a computer network to obtain unauthorized access to information. A hacker is a person who tries to hack into computer systems. This is a misconception that hacking is always wrong. There are hackers who work with different motives. Let's have a look at 3 different types of hackers. Black hat hackers are individuals who illegally hack into a system for a monetary gain. On the contrary, we have white hat hackers who exploit the vulnerabilities in a system by hacking into it with permission in order to defend the organization. This form of hacking is absolutely legal and ethical. Hence, they are also often referred to as ethical hackers. In addition to these hackers, we also have the gray hat hackers. As the name suggests, the color gray is a blend of both white and black. These hackers discover vulnerabilities in a system and report it to the system's owner, which is a good act. But they do this without seeking the owner's approval. Sometimes gray hat hackers also ask for money in return for the spotted vulnerabilities. Now that you have seen the different types of hackers, let's understand more about the hacking that is legal and valid, ethical hacking, through an interesting story. Dan runs a trading company. He does online training with the money his customers invest. Everything was going well, and Dan's business was booming, until a hacker decided to hack the company's servers. The hacker stole the credentials of various trading accounts. He asked for a lump sum ransom in exchange for the stolen credentials. Dan took the hacker's words lightly and didn't pay the hacker. As a result, the hacker withdrew money from various customers' accounts, and Dan was liable to pay back the customers. Dan lost a lot of money, and also the trust of his customers. After this incident, Dan gave a lot of thought as to what could have gone wrong with the security infrastructure in his company. He wished there was someone from his company who could have run a test attack to see how vulnerable his systems were before the hacker penetrated into the network. This was when he realized he needed an employee who thinks like a hacker and identifies the vulnerabilities in his network before an outsider does. To do this job, he hired an ethical hacker, John. John was a skilled professional who worked precisely like a hacker. In no time, he spotted several vulnerabilities in Dan's organization and closed all the loopholes. Hiring an ethical hacker helped Dan protect his customers from further attacks in the future. This, in turn, increased the company's productivity and guarded the company's reputation. So, now you know hacking is not always bad. John, in this scenario, exposed the vulnerabilities in the existing network, and such hacking is known as ethical hacking. Ethical hacking is distributed into 6 different phases. Let us look at these phases step by step with respect to how John, our ethical hacker, will act. Before launching an attack, the first step John takes is to gather all the necessary information about the organization's system that he intends to attack. This step is called reconnaissance. He uses tools like Nmap and hping for this purpose. John then tries to spot the vulnerabilities, if any, in the target system using tools like Nmap and Nexpose. This is the scanning phase. Now that he has located the vulnerabilities, he then tries to exploit them. This step is known as gaining access. After John makes his way through the organization's networks, he tries to maintain his access for future attacks by installing backdoors in the target system. The Metasploit tool helps him with this. This phase is called maintaining access. John is a brilliant hacker. Hence, he tries his best not to leave any evidence of his attack. This is the 5th phase, clearing tracks. We now have the last phase, that is reporting. In this phase, John documents a summary of his entire attack, the vulnerabilities he spotted, the tools he used, and the success rate of the attack. Looking into the report, Dan is now able to take a call and see how to protect his organization from any external cyber attacks. Don't you all think John is an asset to any organization? If you want to become an ethical hacker like John, then there are a few skills that you need to acquire. First and foremost, you need to have a good knowledge of operating environments such as Windows, Linux, Unix, and Macintosh. You must have reasonably good knowledge of programming languages such as HTML, PHP, Python, SQL, and JavaScript. Networking is the base of ethical hacking, hence, you should be good at it. Ethical hackers should be well aware of security laws so that they don't misuse their skills. Finally, you must have a global certification on ethical hacking to successfully bag a position of an ethical hacker like John. Few examples of ethical hacking certification are Certified Ethical Hacker Certification, CEH, CompTIA Pentest Plus, and Licensed Penetration Tester Certification, to name a few. The endless growth of technologies in this area is directly proportional to the number of cybercrimes. Hence, to tackle these cybercrimes, organizations are continuously on the lookout for cybersecurity professionals.
So, let's talk about hacking and what exactly hacking is. Hacking refers to exploiting weaknesses in a computer network to obtain unauthorized access to information. A hacker is a person who tries to hack into computer systems. Now here there are some keywords that we need to understand. First and foremost, exploit. When you are exploiting weaknesses are technically called vulnerabilities, which are basically design flaws, misconfiguration errors, usage of default usernames and passwords which have not been modified. So any misconfiguration or anything that has been left behind by a security administrator that can be misused, which means exploited by a hacker to gain unauthorized access. So the next term is unauthorized access, something that you're not allowed to do. And when you say a hacker is a person who tries to hack, it's basically a person with malicious intent trying to gain access to a system or a resource that they are not authorized to access in the first place. How do they do it? They find a vulnerability that is a weakness or a flaw, and then they misuse it to gain access to that particular network. So here in the diagram, you can see that a sender on the left hand side is trying to send some data to the receiver on the right hand side. The hacker would try to gain unauthorized access to the transmission that is being sent and would try to capture the data packets and read the secrets within. Let's look at a business case scenario into hacking. Now there is an organization, everybody is going around their own business when they realize that their systems may have been compromised. Now they're trying to look at the customer data to ensure that that has not been compromised and trying to assure the customers. However, they do realize that some customer data has been lost and even the company reports have been modified as well. Now this is the scenario where there have been some security controls in place and those controls have been identified. They realized that there is an attack that has happened, and based on that attack they have realized that their data has now been compromised and their records have been modified by the hacker, which means that the data is no longer trustworthy and thus cannot be used by the business for any legal transactions. So then the hacker gives a call to the organization or gets connected to the organization demanding a ransom for the data to be replaced, to be taken back into the original state where it was trusted, and thus the organization can utilize it for business transactions. The organization has probably no backup, so they decide that they want to pay the lump sum to the hacker to restore that data so that they can continue on with the business. Thus money exchanges and the hacker is able to restore that data and the business continues as usual. However, the activity here of a hacker trying to leverage the misconfiguration of the weaknesses in the organization's security, thus being able to hack them and make these ransomware demands. So the company then wants to figure out, even if having a security system in place, how was the hacker able to hack their systems? Thus, one of the employees comes up with a brilliant idea of identifying vulnerabilities in the network to proactively search for any flaws that have been left behind, so that they can plug those flaws and nobody can misuse them. Thus, they figure out that they want to hire an ethical hacker who would help them identify the security posture of the organization, identify the weaknesses, vulnerabilities, and flaws, and help them remedy those flaws so that in future scenarios, these scenarios will not happen. So before we go into an ethical hacker, let's understand what are the types of hackers. So what are the types of hackers? Hacker is a technically skilled person who is very adept with computers. They have good programming skills, they understand how operating system works, they understand how networks work, they understand how to identify flaws and vulnerabilities within all of these aspects, and then they understand and know how to misuse these flaws to get a outcome which would be detrimental to the health of the organization. So there are 6 types of hackers that have been identified: black hat hackers, white hat hackers, grey hat, script kiddies, nation sponsored hackers, and hacktivists. So black hat hackers are basically the malicious hackers who have malicious intent and have criminalistic tendencies. They want to harm the organization by hacking into their infrastructure, by destroying their infrastructure, by destroying their data, so that they can gain from it from a monetary perspective. These guys are also known as crackers. The main aspect of these people are that they have malicious intent, they try to do unauthorized activities, and they try it for personal gain. Another important aspect to remember is that a black hat hacker will always try to hide their identity. They will spoof their online digital identity by masking it, by spoofing their IP addresses, MAC addresses, and try to remain anonymous on the network. A white hat hacker, on the other hand, is also an ethical hacker or a security analyst who's an individual who will do exactly the same thing that a black hat hacker would do, minus the malicious intent, plus the intent of helping the organization identifying the flaws and remedying them so that nobody else can misuse those vulnerabilities. So they are authorized to act on the company's behalf. They are authorized to do that activity which would help the company identify those flaws and thus help the company mitigate those flaws, improving on their security posture. So these kind of security experts or ethical hackers would help organizations defend themselves against unauthorized attacks. Grey hat hackers is a blend of both white hat and black hat hackers. So here they can work defensively and offensively both. They can accept contracts from organizations to increase their security posture. At the same time, they can also get themselves involved in malicious activities towards other organizations to personally gain or benefit from them by doing unauthorized activity. Script kiddies are people who are technically not much aware about what hacking is. They rely on existing tools that have been created by other hackers. They have no technical knowledge of what they're doing. It's just a hit or miss for them. So they just get their hands on a tool. They try to execute those tools. If the hack works, it works. Otherwise, it doesn't. So these people are basically who are noobs or newbies who are trying to learn hacking, or just people who with malicious intent who just want to have some fun or trying to impress people around. Then we have the nation or the state-sponsored hackers. As the name suggests, these hackers are sponsored by their government. Now, this may not be a legitimate job, but most of the governments do have hackers enrolled in their on their organizations to spy on their enemies, to spy on various countries and try to figure out the aspirations of those countries. So this is basically a spying activity where you're technically trying to get access to other countries' resources and then try to spy on them to figure out what their activities have been or what their future plans have been. And then we have the hacktivists, who is an individual who has a political agenda to promote, and they promote it by doing hacking. So these guys, what is the difference between a black hat hacker and a hacktivist? The black hat hacker may try to hide their identity. A hacktivist will claim responsibility of what they have done. So for them, it's a political agenda, a political cause, and they will try to hack various organizations to promote their cause. They would probably do this by defacing the website and posting the messages that they want to promote on these websites. So what exactly is ethical hacking then? We have discussed the types of hackers. We have identified a malicious hacker as a black hat hacker with the intent of doing harm to an organization's network for personal gain. We have discussed what the ethical hacker is. So an ethical hacker would be doing the same activity but in an authorized manner. So they would have legal contracts that they would be signing with the organization, which would give them a definite scope of what they're allowed to do and what they are not allowed to do. And the ethical hackers would function within those scopes, would try to execute those test scenarios where they would be able to identify those flaws or those system vulnerabilities, and then they would be submitting a report to the management of what they have found. They would also help the management to mitigate or to resolve those weaknesses so that nobody else can misuse them later on. They might use the same techniques and the same tools that black hat hackers do. However, the main difference here is that these guys are authorized to do that particular activity. They're doing it in a controlled manner with the intent of helping the organization and not with the intent of personal gains. So who's an ethical hacker? Again, an ethical hacker is a highly intelligent, highly educated person who knows how computers function, how programming languages work, how operating systems work. They can troubleshoot. They're technically very adept at computing. They understand the architecture. They understand how various components in a computer work. They can troubleshoot those components, and they can basically be very good with programming as well. Now, when I say programming, we don't want an ethical hacker to be a good developer of applications. We want them to understand programming in such a way that they can create scripts, they can write their own short programs like viruses, worms, trojans, or exploits which would help them achieve the objective that they have set out for. So here you can see the ethical hacker. They are individuals who perform a security assessment of their companies with the permission of concerned authorities. So what is a security assessment? A security assessment is finding out the exact security posture of the organization by identifying what security controls are in place, how they've been configured, and if there are any gaps in the configurations themselves. So an organization will hire an ethical hacker. They would give the ethical hacker the information about what information is or what security controls, what firewalls, what IDSS, IPSS, intrusion detection or intrusion prevention systems, antiviruses are already in place, and then they will ask the ethical hacker to figure out a way to bypass these mechanisms and see if they can still hack the organization. What is the need of an ethical hacker? The need of an ethical hacker is proactive security. The ethical hacker would identify all the existing flaws in an organization and try to resolve those flaws to help secure the organization from black hat hackers. So ethical hackers would prevent hackers from cracking into an organization's network by securing the organization, by improving on their security on a periodic basis. And they would also try to identify system vulnerabilities, network vulnerabilities, or application level vulnerabilities that would have been missed or have already been missed, and then try to figure out a way of plugging them or resolving them so that they cannot be misused by other hackers. They would also analyze and enhance an organization's security policies. Now, what are policies? Policies are basically documents that have been created by an organization of rules that all the employees need to follow to ensure that the security of an organization is maintained. For example, a password policy. A password policy would help users in an organization to adhere to the standards the organization has identified for a password complexity. For example, a password, when a user is creating them, should adhere to standards where they are using random words. They contain the alphabet A through Z, uppercase and lowercase, 0 through 9 as numerics, and special characters, and they are randomized so that the password becomes more stronger to prevent from brute force attacks. So what would an ethical hacker do at this point in time? They would try to test the strength of the passwords to see if brute force attacks or dictionary attacks are possible, and if any of these passwords can be cracked. They would ensure that all the employees are following the policies and all the passwords are as secured as the policies want them to be. If there are any gaps in the policies or the implementation of the policy, it is the ethical hacker's responsibility to identify those gaps and warn the organization about it. Similarly, they would also try to protect any personal information, any data that is owned by the organization that is critical for the functioning of the organization, and they will try to protect it from falling into the hacker's hands. Now, what are the skills that are required of an ethical hacker? These are the following skills. So first and foremost, they should have good knowledge with operating systems such as Windows, Linux, Unix, and Mac. Now, when we say knowledge about operating systems, it's not only about how to use those operating systems, but how to troubleshoot those operating systems, how these operating systems work, how these operating systems need to be configured, how can they be secured. For example, securing an operating system is not only installing a firewall and an antivirus, but you need to configure permissions on an operating system of what users are allowed to do and what users are not allowed to do. For example, limiting the installation of applications. How are we going to do that? We need to go into the system center, the security center of Windows, and we need to configure security parameters over there of what are acceptable softwares and what are not. Same with Linux and Mac softwares, operating systems. So we need to know how we can secure these operating systems. Similarly, all of these would have desktop versions and server versions of operating systems. As an ethical hacker, we need to know the desktop and server versions both, how to configure them and how to provide services within the organization on these servers so that they can be consumed in a secure manner by all the employees. At the same time, they should also be knowledgeable of programming languages or scripting languages such as PHP, Python, Ruby, HTML for programming, if you will, because web servers come into the picture. So again, they should not be great developers where they can create huge applications, but they should be able to develop scripts, understand those scripts, analyze those scripts, and figure out what the output should be of those scripts to achieve the hacking goals that they have set out for. An ethical hacker should have a very good understanding about networking. No matter whether you're in application security, you're in network security, or you're in host-based security, since a computer will always be connected to a network, either a local area network like a LAN or the internet, we should know how networking works. We should know the 7 layers of the OSI model. We should know which protocols work on those 7 layers. We should identify the TCP/IP model and how a OSI model can be mapped to the TCP/IP model. We should understand how TCP and UDP work, how each and every protocol is crafted, how they are supposed to behave for us to analyze and understand any network-based attacks. We should be very good in security measures. So we should know where those vulnerabilities would lie, what are the latest exploits available in the market, and we should be able to identify them. We should be able to know the techniques and the tools of how to deal with security, how to analyze security, and then how to implement security to enhance it as well. Along with that, it is important that a security analyst or ethical hacker is aware of the local security laws and standards. Why is that? Because an organization cannot do any illegal activity. Whatever responses that they have, whatever security mechanisms, whatever security controls they will implement, they need to be adhering to the local law of the land. They should be legal in nature and should not cause undue harm to any of the employees or any of the third-party clients that they are dealing with. So the ethical hacker should be aware of what security laws are before they implement security controls, or even before they start testing for security controls. And all of these should be backed up by having a global certification or a globally valid certification related to networking, related to security, ethical hacking, the law of the land, anything and everything. Maybe even programming. It's good to have a certification in PHP, Perl, Python, Ruby, and so on and so forth. Why? Because most of the organizations, when they hire ethical hackers, look out for these certifications, especially globally valid certifications, so that they can be sure, or they can be assured that the person that they are hiring has the required skill set. So let's talk about a few of the tools that an ethical hacker would utilize in their testing scenarios. To be honest, there are hundreds of tools out there. What you see on the screen are just a few examples of them. Nessus is a vulnerability scanner. What is a vulnerability scanner? It is an automated tool that is designed to identify vulnerabilities within hosts, within operating systems, within networks. So they come with their ready-made databases of all the vulnerabilities that have already been identified, and they scan the network against that database to find out any possible flaws or any possible vulnerabilities that currently exist on the host or the operating system or on the network. Similarly, there would be application scanners like Acunetics or Arachne that would help you scan applications and identify flaws within those applications as well. Now, all of these are automated tools. The essence of ethical hacker is when these tools churn out the reports, the ethical hacker can understand these reports, analyze them, identify the flaws, and then craft their own exploits or use existing exploits in a particular manner so that they can get access, or they can bypass the access security controls mechanisms that are already in place. How can they do that? With the tool called Metasploit. You see that big M there on the right hand side? That M logo is for a tool called Metasploit, which is a penetration testing tool. What is a penetration testing tool? It is that tool that will allow an ethical hacker to craft their exploits or choose their exploits for the vulnerabilities that have been identified by Nessus. Since we are interacting with computers, we will always be interacting using tools, right? So the first tool, Nessus, identifies the flaws and the possible list of vulnerabilities. We do a penetration test using Metasploit to validate those flaws and to verify that those flaws actually exist, and try to figure out the complexity of those flaws. And that's where Metasploit helps us do that. Wireshark would be used in the background while we are doing both the activities using Nessus or Metasploit to to keep a track of what packets are being sent and by received on the network, which will help us analyze those packets. So whenever I run a Nessus scanner, I would run a Wireshark in the background. It will capture the data packets, and I can go through those data packets and analyze that data packets to identify what Nessus is actually trying to do. Similarly, when I try to attack a machine using exploit or Metasploit, I will keep on Wireshark running in the background to capture the data packets that have been sent and the responses that I have received from the victim, so that I can also go through those packets and analyze the responses and analyze the attack, whether it was successful, to what extent was it successful, and basically will also give me a validation, a proof of the activity that has happened. Nmap is another automated tool that allows me to scan for open ports and protocols. So why would I use Nmap? Because ports and protocols become an entry point for a hacker to gain access to devices. For example, when we connect to a web server, we connect through a web browser, but we automatically connect to port 80 using HTTP and port 443 is using HTTPS. So if I'm connecting to a web server using HTTPS, it is safe to assume that port 443 on the web server is open to accept those connections. Similarly, there would be other services that may be left open on the web server because nobody thought about configuring it, or they misconfigured the web server and they left unwanted services running. So Nmap will allow me to scan those ports and services and allow me to understand what services are being offered on that server, so then I can start analyzing that server, identify those flaws within those services, and then try to attack them. If the application that I'm analyzing is connected to a database and I want to do a SQL injection attack, or if Nessus tells me that there is a SQL injection attack that may be possible on that particular application, I can use an automated tool called SQL map or SQL map that would allow me to automatically craft all the queries that are required for a SQL injection attack and help me do that attack at the same time. So here I do not have to manually create my own queries. The SQL map tool would automatically create them for me. What I would do is I would use Nessus to identify that particular flaw. If Nessus reports that flaw, I would then go use the tool SQL map, configure it to attack that particular web server, and when I fire off the tool, it will then automatically start directing queries, SQL injection queries, to the database to see if those databases are vulnerable, and if yes, what data can be retrieved from those databases. So all of these tools in a nutshell would help me hack networks, applications, operating systems, and host devices. And this is what an ethical hacker does. They use these kind of tool sets, they identify what attacks they need to do, they identify the right tool for that particular attack, and they write their exploits, they create those attacks, and then they start attacking, analyze the response, and then give a report to the management, providing them feedback about how the attack was created or crafted, what was the response to that attack, and whether the attack was successful or not. If successful, they would also give recommendations of what to do to prevent these attacks from happening in the future. When we want to launch these attacks, what is the process that we would follow? So there are 6 steps that we would do as an ethical hacker. If you're just a hacker, you probably wouldn't do the 6th step, which is a reporting step. So the first step that would be done is the reconnaissance phase, which is the information gathering phase, which is very important from an ethical hacker's perspective or a hacker's perspective. Because if I want to attack someone or something as a digital device, I need to know what I'm attacking. I need to know the IP address of the device, the MAC address of those devices. I need to know the operating system, the build or the version of that operating systems, applications on top, the versions of those applications, so I know what I'm attacking. For example, if I want to attack a server, I assume it's a Windows-based server and I use a particular tool to attack it, but it actually turns out to be a Linux-based server, my attacks are going to be unsuccessful. So I need to focus my attack based on what is there at the other end. So in my information gathering phase, I want to identify all of that information. Once I have that information done, I'm going to scan those servers using tools like Nmap that we just talked about, and we're going to try to see the open ports, open services, and protocols that are running on that server that can give me possible entry points within the network or within the device or within the operating system. At the same time, along with the scanning with Nmap, I would run a vulnerability scanner the Nessus vulnerability scanner we talked about, or Acunetics for applications, and then I would try to identify vulnerabilities in those applications, operating systems, or networks. Once I have identified those vulnerabilities in the scanning phase, I would then move on to the gaining phase, where I would then craft my exploits or choose existing exploits and start attacking the victim. At this point in time, if my attack is successful, I will probably have gained access by either cracking passwords or escalating privileges or exploiting a vulnerability that I may have found during the scanning phase. Once I have gained my access, I want to maintain my access. Why? Because the vulnerability may not be there for long. Maybe somebody updated the operating system and hence the flaw was no longer existing, or somebody changed the password that I may have cracked, thus I no longer have access. So what do I do to maintain my access? I install Trojans or backdoor entries to those systems, using which I can secretly, in a covert manner, get access to those devices at my own will, at my own time, as long as those devices are available over the network. So that's where I maintain my access. I have hacked them. Now I want to maintain my access, so I install a software which would give me a backdoor entry to that device no matter what. Once I have done this, I want to clear my tracks. So whatever activity that I've been doing, for example, installing a Trojan is also a software that would create directories and files once installed on the victim's machine. So I want to hide that. If I have accessed data stores, if I have modified data, I want to hide that activity, because if the victim comes to know that something has happened, they would start increasing their security parameters. They might start scanning their devices. They may take them offline. Thus, my hack would no longer be efficient. The reason I'm clearing my tracks is that the victim doesn't find out that they have been hacked or they have been compromised, or even if they do find out that they've been compromised, they cannot trace the compromise back to me. So I would be deleting references of any of the IP addresses or MAC addresses that I may have used to attack that particular device. And this is where I will be able to identify where those logs were created, where those traces are. Once I take off those traces, the victim would not be any wiser of whether they have been compromised or who compromised their system. And if I am successful at all of these stages, or to whatever extent the success that I've achieved in any of these stages, I would then create a report based on that, and I would report to the management about the activities that we have been able to do and whatever we have been able to achieve out of those activities. For example, we identified 10 different flaws. There were 20 different attacks that we wanted to do. What attack did we do? What was the outcome of that attack? What was the intended or the expected output of that attack? I'll create a report which would give a detailed analysis of all the steps that were taken, along with screenshots and evidences of what activity was conducted, what was the output, what was the expected output, and I would submit that report to the management, giving them an idea of what vulnerabilities and flaws exist in their environment or their devices that need to be mitigated so that the security can be enhanced. So these are the 6 steps that the ethical hacking process would take. Just going through this, the reconnaissance is where you're going to use hacking tools like Nmap, HPing to obtain information about targets. There are hundreds of tools out there depending on what information you want. Then in scanning, again, Nmap, Nexpose, these kind of tools to be utilized to identify open ports, protocols, and services. In gaining access, you're going to exploit a vulnerability by using the Metasploit tool that we talked about in the previous slides. In the maintaining access, you're going to install backdoors. You can use Metasploit at the same time. You can craft your own scripts to create a Trojan and install it on the victim's machine. Once you have achieved that, clearing tracks is where you're going to clear all evidences of your activity so that you do not get caught or the victim doesn't even realize that they have been hacked. And once you're done all of this, we are going to create reports that are going to be submitted to the management to help them understand the current security evaluation of their organization. So now let's see how we can hack using social engineering. Now, what is social engineering? Social engineering is the art of manipulating humans into revealing confidential information which they otherwise would not have revealed. So this is where your social skill and your people skills come into the picture. If you are able to communicate effectively to another person, they would probably give up more information that they intended to give out. Let's look at examples, right? If you see on the screen, phishing activity. What is phishing? We receive a lot of fake mails on a regular basis. We have always received those emails where we have won a lottery of a few $1 million, but we have never realized that we didn't purchase a lottery to win a lottery in the first place. We have always had those Nigerian frauds where a prince died in some South African country and you out of 7 billion people on the planet have been identified where they want to transfer a few $100 million through your account and they want to give you 50% of that money in return as thank you. So some very basic attacks where you go onto websites and there's a banner flashing at you saying congratulations, you're the 1 millionth visitor to this website, click here to claim your prize. All of these are social engineering attacks, phishing attacks, fake websites, fake communications being sent out to users to prey on their gullibility. Most of humans always have that dream of striking it rich, winning a huge lottery once and for all, and living their life lavishly ever after. But sadly, in the real world, that doesn't happen that often. And if you're receiving those mails, it is very important that you first research the validity of those communications before you even want to act upon them. So why are humans susceptible to social engineering? Because humans have emotion. Machines do not. Try pleading with a machine to give you access to an account that you have forgotten a password to. The machine wouldn't even know what you're doing. Try pleading with a human, sympathy or empathy, where you could try to create a social engineering attack where you can plead with them saying, if I do not get access to this account immediately, I might lose my job. And then that would put my family into problems. Somebody would feel empathy or sympathy towards you and help you reset that password and give you access to that account. It's how good the attack is and how convincing you are for the success of this attack to happen. So what is a familiarity exploit? Attackers interact with victims to gain information which will benefit the attackers to crack credentials. As passwords, if we want to reset our passwords, what do we have as a mechanism to resetting passwords? We have some security questions that we set up. Those questions are nothing but personal information that we would know. But through a social engineering attack, it would be easily be able to gather the information that you have set for your security questions. The security questions can be as simple as the first school that you attended. You probably have that listed on your LinkedIn profile, where a person can just go in there and see your academic qualifications and identify the school that you were in, right? Similarly, it might also be a question, what was your mother's maiden name? That's a very good attack. And that's, if a person can interact with you, let's say they're trying to take a survey and they approach you for a feedback on a particular product that you have been utilizing, and they ask you these questions, you wouldn't think twice before giving those answers. As long as the request sounds legitimate to us, we are able to justify that request, we do answer those queries. So it's upon us to verify the authenticity of the request coming in before we answer it. Phishing, as discussed, would be fraudulent emails which appear to be coming from a trusted source. So email spoofing comes into mind, fake websites, and so on and so forth. Exploiting human curiosity. Curiosity killed the cat, right? So there's so many physical attacks where hackers just keep pen drives lying around in a parking lot. Now this is a generic attack. Whoever falls victim will fall victim. So if I just throw around a few USBs in the parking lot, obviously with Trojans implemented on them, some people who are curious or who are looking for a couple of freebies might take up those pen drives, plug them in their computers to see what data is on the pen drives. At the same time, once they plug in those pen drives on their computers, the virus or the Trojan would get infected and cause harm to their machine. Then exploiting human greed. We just talked about the Nigerian frauds and the lotteries, those kind of attacks, the fake money making gimmicks. Now basically this is where you prey upon the person's greed kicking in, and they are clicking on those links in order to get that money that has been promised to them in that email. So one of the safest mechanisms to keep data private and to keep yourself secure is using encryption. Now encryption can happen through cryptography. What is cryptography? Cryptography is the art of scrambling data using a particular algorithm so that the data becomes unreadable to the normal user. The only person with the key to unscramble that data would be able to unscramble it and make sense out of that data. So we're just making it unreadable or non-readable by using a particular key or a particular algorithm, and then we're going to send the key to the end user. The end user using this same key would then decrypt that data. If anybody compromises that data while it is being sent over the network, since it is encrypted, they would not be able to read it. So the encryption algorithm would be something like this. Now if you see the computer word once made into unreadable format would look like EQORXVGT. For an end user it wouldn't make any sense, but the person who has a key to unscramble that would be able to convert it back to computer and then understand the meaning of that word. So this is just a substitution cipher that is being shown on the screen. So what is the